Hello and welcome to Improve Your English with me, Nick Gold. The subject of this presentation, as you'll see from the title, is Accidental Renaissance Photography. So what is it? Well, Accidental Renaissance Photography is a style of photography, a genre of photography that I discovered quite recently on the internet. I like looking at photographs, I like looking at art photography, and this is something I've discovered and want to share with you now. So to explain exactly what accidental Renaissance photography is, I ought to first of all start with the word Renaissance. So if I go to this text function here and type the word Renaissance, needs to be a bit larger, I think. I can do that. I have the technology. Here we go. That should be better. Yeah, there we are. Renaissance. Now I can also use the lookup function here on Microsoft Word. Smart lookup, they call it. And it says, Renaissance, the revival of art and literature under the influence of classical models in the 14th to 16th centuries. So you see Renaissance here has a capital R. We're talking about the Renaissance, which is a period, a movement in history. But you can see sometimes the word with a small r as well, and it has a more general meaning. But the Renaissance is the revival of art and literature under the influence of classical models in the 14th to 16th centuries. So I don't want to dwell too much on the history, but not that I'm an expert on history anyway. But Europe, it's European history we're talking about, and European history, culture and art and philosophy and so on reached a peak perhaps in the past with the Greek and the Roman empires. But when those empires collapsed and declined, Europe went into a period known as the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, where culture and art and philosophy declined or even went into reverse. But then there was a renaissance, a rebirth, if you like, of art and culture under the influence of classical models, it said. One of my history teachers once explained this to me in terms of the Greek and Roman Empire being like the peak of a mountain down into a deep dark valley during the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, and then up onto a new peak, the Renaissance. During the Renaissance, people looked back to the previous peak for inspiration, I suppose you could say. So that's the Renaissance. Perhaps it might be better to refer to it as the European Renaissance. But what about the word generally? Well, I can use another function, the synonym function. Okay, words with a similar meaning. Rebirth. Something has been born, something has been born again. You'll see the word has this prefix, Renaissance. All these words have this prefix, re, Renaissance, rebirth, resurgence. They all have this re prefix, which means repeat, something that happens again. Repeat itself starts with the prefix re. So we're looking at rebirth, resurgence, something coming to the front, coming forwards again. Revitalization, a life being repeated. A revival, same idea, a life being repeated. So think of a sentence where we might see this word Renaissance with a small r. Something is experiencing a renaissance, or we see a renaissance, we see a rebirth. Let's take an example from fashion, say. We could say in the fashion world, we get this right, we have seen a renaissance of flared trousers. perhaps a better way of saying that, better way of saying it, the flared trousers have experienced, let's say experienced a renaissance in the fashion world. Okay, so flared trousers, trousers with this kind of shape on the leg, they were fashionable in the past, in the 1970s. Then they went into a decline. They were very unfashionable for a long period of time. Maybe now they're fashionable again. So we've seen a renaissance. I use that word in that way, with a small r, but with a capital R, we see it like this, renaissance. Then we need the article the. We might add European there as well. The European Renaissance, the period in history. Okay, so let me move on. Before we get on to the photographs, let me just move on to a short video introduction to the Renaissance, which I found, which is quite useful. Let me just go back to the beginning. I'll play it. There's some nice Renaissance music over the top of this, but I've turned that off just for the purposes of this broadcast. So here's an introduction. It says the Middle Ages have brought forth a time of, let me just go through it, brought forth a time of the plague, disease, death, the Great Schism, yet a new age emerged, one that was inspired by the classics of ancient Greece and Rome, and an age that would define the world for the next several hundred years. New styles of art were introduced, and we see some examples. Frescoes, okay, just looking at some examples of the kind of paintings now that are associated with the Renaissance period. Mona Lisa there, a crucifixion, famous painting there by Botticelli, I believe. Sculptures, Renaissance sculptures. It's Michelangelo's David, that one, I believe. Architecture, new styles of building that appeared during the Renaissance. Scientific discoveries were made during the Renaissance. Discovery of the circulatory system around the human body, the heliocentric universe, the idea of the universe being, or the solar system being centered on the sun, anatomy. These are the people that changed the world. Some famous people associated with the Renaissance: Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Copernicus, the astronomer, Machiavelli, the political theorist, John Calvin, a religious reformer, Queen Elizabeth I of England, that is, King Henry VIII, a Renaissance figure, Geoffrey Chaucer, the playwright. This is the age of rebirth. Okay, we saw the word rebirth before. This is the Renaissance. There we go. Quite a useful introduction there. Just mention a few of the words at the beginning. The Middle Ages. Let me pause it. Go back. The Middle Ages. Let me find it again. There we are. Have brought forth a time. Brought forth a time. That means brought forward into time. It's quite an old-fashioned way of speaking that. Brought forth. But you do see it occasionally. Okay. Just a quick slideshow here before we get onto the photographs. We're almost there. Just wanted to give you an idea of what Renaissance paintings look at. I'm not going to dwell on the paintings here because it's the photographs I want to get onto, but just to get an idea, give you an idea of Renaissance imagery, what it was like. crucifixion, landscape photography. Strictly speaking, I don't know if all of these images are Renaissance. This one certainly isn't. That's by a painter called Danby, which was from a later period but influenced by the Renaissance. It's a Renaissance portrait. Okay, get the idea. So let's go on and have a look at some of these photographs. Now this is, I think this is the photograph that really that this phrase accidental Renaissance was first applied to. I think I'm right in saying this is the first. And the uploader here has usefully put a caption for us. Someone took a candid photo of a fight in Ukrainian, well, they've missed out the article here, so a bit of a mistake. A fight in that should be the Ukrainian parliament, that is as well composed as the best Renaissance art. So look at this photograph. It's a fight in the Ukrainian parliament, but it really does look like a Renaissance painting. There's a little diagram here, some lines drawn over the photograph that show how the painting adheres to the rules of Renaissance painting. There are a set of rules that were used by painters when they were deciding where to put certain figures on their paintings, and this painting fits very well these rules of composition. And just to say something about this word compose. To compose. To compose. Okay, in this context, that verb means to arrange, to place things in a particular order. The word composer. Composer is, in the context of music, is someone who arranges music in a particular way, music from different instruments and so on. We might say I had to compose myself before my interview. To compose myself before my interview. That's a different context and a different meaning, really. That would mean before an interview, if I was very nervous, if I was panicking a bit, if I was speaking too fast, before the interview I had to stop that. I had to sort of calm myself down, compose myself before my interview. So the word can be used in different contexts. There we are again. Okay, so that's an example of an accidental Renaissance photograph. It's probably true that the photographer hasn't deliberately tried to copy any Renaissance style. It's an accident. The photograph has ended up looking like a Renaissance painting accidentally. Let's look at some more. Okay, this is a series of photographs that have been described as accidental Renaissance from sport, particularly football, and this is an example. This really does look like, if you look at the photograph, it really does look like a scene from a Renaissance painting. I know the occasion here actually. This is a football match that I watched, and the player in the centre there is Frank Lampard of Chelsea Football Club, and I think about the week or in the fortnight before this football match, his mother had died, sadly, and he decided that if he scored a goal in this particular game, he was going to dedicate it to the memory of his late mother. And he has scored a goal, and this is the goal celebration. But it looks like a Renaissance painting. You can imagine that the player there, Frank Lampard, has just come down from a crucifixion, down off the cross after a crucifixion, and the other players, his teammates, are consoling him. There's a Renaissance crucifixion painting. Look at the similarity there, the expression on the faces, the gestures. Really, a really strong similarity, I think, between those two images. It's quite fascinating. Here's another image from a football match. The end of a football match here, and I think the occasion here is the player is Steven Gerrard of Liverpool, and I think this was his last game for Liverpool, and fans there have come onto the pitch to congratulate him. But that could easily be an image. It bears many similarities to an image from a Renaissance painting. Another goal celebration. This is quite different. This is a landscape. A wonderful photograph, I think, actually, but this is a landscape, and it was taken, I think it's in Russia or possibly Ukraine, I don't know for sure, but we can see the scene here. It's a beach by the side of a river. These young people have been swimming in the river, and there's a storm has come over. A hailstorm. Hailstones are falling from the sky. You can see them splashing on the surface of the river there, on the water. It must be quite painful, and the swimmers are rushing out of the water and running for cover. But the colours, the composition, the drama of the image again are very reminiscent of Renaissance photography. There's some similarity, I think, but between this scene and this Dutch landscape. The colours are similar. But there's a similarity also with this kind of image, which again is not strictly speaking a Renaissance painting. It's from a later period. It's by a painter called Danby, and it's called The Deluge. It's the flood from the Bible. But I think you can see a similarity there. This is a photograph taken by a photojournalist, I assume. I think it's in New York, because we can see the badge on the police officer there. City of New York Police Department. I think this is during a protest, an anti-capitalist protest, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. And it seems that this woman has been arrested. But it's the way that she has been photographed, the expression on her face, as well as the arrangement, the composition again, the way the three figures in the photograph here are looking in different directions, and there's a kind of circular movement in the photograph. But if you compare this Renaissance portrait, not sure who that's by, but the expression is very similar. Although the young woman here is looking up, it's almost as though she's looking up towards the heavens and asking, why has this happened to me? You can imagine that. This image also, this is circulated widely on the internet, and again it's been given this label of accidental Renaissance photography. It's like one of these very complicated scenes involving many people that are composed in a particular way, different little pockets of action. And I think one of the striking similarities here is the pose of this figure lying on the road here. What's going on here? It's obviously late at night. This is I think this must be in Manchester in the UK. I can see Arndale on the sign there, which I believe is a shopping centre in Manchester in the UK. These are people spilling out from bars and clubs, perhaps at the end of a night of drinking, an evening of drinking. Someone here being arrested, has been bundled down to the ground by police. But look at this figure here and in the centre, and compare this. This is a famous image of the Creation, a Renaissance painting of the Creation by, now is this Michelangelo? Michelangelo, I believe. And we can see a similarity between the figure of God there, who is creating Adam, or has just created Adam, the story from the Bible, Genesis. And this figure there, lying on the road, drunk, reaching out for his bottle of beer, his bottle of lager. Great deal of similarity in the pose there. Fascinating, really. A scene of destruction, a scene of war from, where is it? Could be Syria, could be Libya, oil fields burning there, scene of disaster, very common Renaissance theme. This is a wonderful photograph and a lot of Renaissance themes there. The lighting especially, the dark storm clouds in the sky, but the sun on the sea, making for very dramatic lighting, and the drama of the men there pushing the boat with its passengers out to sea. This is a scene of a storm at sea. Again, I don't know if that's strictly a Renaissance painting, but you can see the similarity in the lighting effect there in the photograph and in the painting. This one's slightly different, I think. This is, well, it's a Renaissance image, it's a photograph, and it's very reminiscent of the Renaissance, but this, I think, is deliberate. This is staged. It's from a series of photographs that have been deliberately made to look like Renaissance paintings. So this is Renaissance photography perhaps, but not accidental. If you compare it to this scene by the painter here, I think is De Hooch, a Dutch painter, I believe. You get the idea. This is a Russian, I believe a Russian astronaut returned to Earth from the International Space Station. I believe I'm right in saying that. But it's the expression on her face, it's the composition again that makes that, that gives that a sort of Renaissance feel to it. Again, compare the expression with the portrait here. An interior scene. Again, it's the dramatic lighting, the positions of the figures. Another scene of war, of disaster perhaps. This is in Kiev, I believe. And this terrifying image is a photograph of an assassination that's just taken place. The killer there is an ISIS member, I believe, and this assassination took place in Ankara in Turkey some time ago, but bears a lot of similarity, I think, to some of the paintings by the Renaissance artist Caravaggio. Very dramatic scene. This is the image here is of David and Goliath. Again, biblical themes are very common in Renaissance painting. So Goliath, there the giant, has been beheaded, but compare those two images, similar mood. This photograph is, not sure what it is actually, of who it is or where it is. I can't quite make out the sign on the door there, but really similar to this painting, this style of painting here by Rembrandt. Dark background, light on the faces. And we're back to the beginning. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at the photographs. I hope you've learned some new words and some new phrases in the process. This is the first of the videos that I've made for my YouTube channel, so sorry if there were mistakes and if it's a little bit rusty. I think I'm going to improve as I go along, and I would welcome any comments, any suggestions, any sort of feedback at all. And if you're interested enough to want to have one-to-one English lessons with me, then visit my website. All the details are there. You can have a free trial lesson if you wish. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I'll be making another fairly soon. So do subscribe to my channel and watch out for more videos in the future. Thank you.